Welcome to another episode of Echoes by Jigyansa. Today, we are delighted to have Dr. Prasad with us, who is a pioneer in biophotonics, nanophotonics. So, SUNY Distinguished Professor at the University at Buffalo, Dr. Prasad has made significant contributions to biophotonics, especially in cancer diagnosis. Now, let's get going and hear from Dr. Prasad.
Welcome to the podcast, sir. It's our pleasure having you here. So, we'll be moving on to the questions now. So, the first question would be, can you describe your remarkable journey from Bihar to the prestigious Institute of Lasers, transitioning from electronics to photonics? What inspired you to choose this vibrant field?
First of all, I want to say good morning to everyone. I am very delighted to be here to giving this interview, and I hope it will be useful. It will be stimulating and inspiring, to hear from me my professional journey, which relates to your question, as you said. So I grew up in a small town called Sitamarhi, which is a historic place because it's supposed to be birthplace of Goddess Sita. When I was born, I had no electricity, no running water. So, but I had plenty of time in the night, in the darkness, to be dreaming big. And that dream was how we can benefit society. And so that was one thing, how we can make a difference. And towards that, I also realized that when the morning came and the light was there, and I recognized the magic of photons, light. And that's why I decided to start working in the area that deal with light, exploring the power of light, whether it is for energy, whether it's for healthcare, whether it's for environmental monitoring. So I became a photonic researcher. Towards that goal, I decided to pursue basic research rather than going to medical school and engineering, and see how that basic research can be translated into technology that benefits society. So I went with that goal to pursue my PhD at University of Pennsylvania, which is in Philadelphia in the US. And I did my research in light-matter interaction. And then after a few years of postdoc at University of Michigan, I ended up in Buffalo, which is again another very well-situated city right next to world-famous Niagara Falls. And I established an institute called Institute for Lasers, Photonics and Biophotonics, which again is how we can exploit light-matter interaction for developing new science and new technology.
Right. Thank you, sir. The story seems really inspiring. So I'm moving on. For our many listeners seeking audience, can you explain what biophotonics is in very simple terms and highlight its significance?
So biophotonics is how we can use again the power of light to detect and stage the progression of a disease, and also how we can use light to treat a disease. So we are looking at using light for imaging, for sensing, for light-activated therapy, for curing diseases. So that's what biophotonics is. And I wrote a book on that, Biophotonics, which is widely used around the world for teaching this important area. It's also translated in Chinese, not in Hindi, but you don't need to have it translated in Hindi. You can all read English, right? So it's a very important field. And actually, you already use biophotonics. You may not know that is biophotonics. For example, you go to a hospital and the first thing, suppose if you're having breathing problem and so on, first thing they want to do is clip this oximeter.
Yes.
To measure the oxygen level in your blood, right? What is that? That is biophotonics. You're using light passing through your blood and looking at the absorption bands of oxyhemoglobin. Okay, so you're using biophotonics over there. You go to ophthalmologist, and if you have any eye issue, what does he do? He does a laser surgery, a laser treatment. What is that? That's biophotonics. You go to a hospital, and if they're doing cancer profiling, they run flow cytometry, which is using light to interrogate each cell and detect if there is a presence of cancer cell. That's biophotonics. Then biophotonics also, when you're looking at change in color to detect disease. What is color? Color is light passing and giving you a response. So that is biophotonics. And you know that you get COVID kit. What do you do in COVID kit? Again, you're looking at colorimetric detection, where you are looking at this dark spot appearing at a place. That's biophotonics. So biophotonics already exists and is benefiting society. What we are trying to do is expand it in many directions. One direction, major direction we are taking is brain disease. You are looking at detecting the dysfunction or disruption of brain function, and we are trying to detect it by using light. That is an area called neurophotonics.
In that case, like, where do you see biophotonics in the next decade? Like, if problems that we have in currently, and how do you think biophotonics can actually remove all these problems in the next decade? Like, you're sure that we won't be having all these problems.
What problems specifically you're talking
in the current diseases we have? Like, what do you think biophotonics can take us to that?
Yeah, so again, human health involves very complicated factors. So you're looking at disease pathology for cancer is different from what it is for infectious disease, what it is for brain cognitive diseases, Alzheimer and others. So you cannot use one tool to cure everything. There is no such magic bullet. But anyway, biophotonics, an important area direction is photodynamic therapy. That is using light to activate certain molecules that creates a toxic environment, for example, to kill cancer cell. Okay? So that area of photodynamic therapy uses light, and light is absorbed by a particular kind of molecule called photosensitizer or drug that's administered, and that drug creates a toxic environment where it is located, which hopefully is cancer, say for example, and to treat that. So that photodynamic therapy is already being used, particularly for skin diseases, where light can very easily be used to treat. So we are trying to expand that photodynamic therapy or phototherapy concept in many ways. That means light-activated therapy in general for many diseases, not just for cancer, but for Alzheimer, for example, infectious disease, for example, even other kinds of cases where that can be utilized.
Yes, sir. Even considering the case of cancer, and what do you think are the major hurdles in translating biophotonics from labs to clinical practice?
Well, the major factor is that light, as you know, does not really have a very deep penetration in the body. We are not transparent to visible light. You go to infrared light, you can get more deeper, but still it does not penetrate as deep as X-ray or ultrasound. That's why when you do chest X-ray and others, you use X-ray, not light to image. So any kind of cancer that is deep-rooted inside, you need to get light to that to do biophotonics treatment. So that puts a limitation. So right now, that is a major hurdle, how you can treat deep tumor and how you can treat a thick tumor, because the light cannot go all the way through. So there are ways. One is to go to longer wavelength. You go to longer wavelength in the IR, you can increase penetration. That's one way. The other one is fiber delivery, that you can use fiber and you can get in there the tumor site, which may be deep rooted. And then you combine it with some other modality. One of them is that we are trying to develop these nanoparticle or nano bullets that can be located at the disease site. And then you can use other means, like maybe X-ray, to activate that generate the light on site over there to treat. Use biophotonics that way. So there are ways in which people are experimenting to advance the scope of biophotonics. And my hope is some of you youngsters will come a more imaginative way. Again, dream big, as I said. I was a dreamer, so I want you to be a dreamer. The other thing in relation to biophotonics I want to point out to you, do not limit your imagination and do not limit, your thinking that you are not trained and maybe not suitable. I never took a course in biology, and yet I'm doing biophotonics research. I wrote a book on biophotonics where there is a big chapter on biology. So don't limit your imagination. Believe in yourself, and anything you embark on, you can train yourself.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this advice. Moving on next, where do you think India falls short in fundamental research compared to Western countries like the US and China, Japan? And as next generation of researchers, how do you think we can fix the gap?
I think that, there is a culture that you need to develop here. And I was happy to see that this ICER meeting that we had, where 7 ICERs came together, is that you need to work with a bigger vision and goal, for which you need to work together. I feel over here that there is a mindset of very much of individualism, where you want to work by yourself, you want to be independent thinker. So that's one part, independent thinker, which is great. But if you combine your thinking with others, then you can make a bigger impact. So that thing that is not there yet, as I see in other countries, especially in the West, and also China now is coming along in that direction. Okay, so somebody said a comparison between Japanese and non and the countries where people don't have a tradition of working together. One Japanese can lift 1 bucket, 2 Japanese can lift 3 buckets. But at that time, the story was about China, that one Chinese can lift 2 buckets on both sides. 2 Chinese can only lift 1 bucket because they don't know how to work together. Okay. So maybe it was also in India. Hopefully it is changing. As I said, that 7 ICERs came. We defined some projects. We committed to work together. That's one part. Second thing is that broaden your vision. You are a student and getting a degree. Fine, get a degree. And you're, of course, thinking that you will get a good job and really financially secure and work. But maybe you can also think in broader prospect. What you are doing, can it make a difference in society? Okay. So if you are in science, not only you write a thesis, but what you are doing, can it have some practical significance? Think about it. The third part is that who translates the technology, science to technology and products? Companies. They manufacture. You are not going to manufacture. So working with company or having that entrepreneurial interest is also important.
And I would love to know your thoughts in this artificial intelligence generation, and how is AI shaping biophotonics, and how is AI causing some, if there are any developments in biophotonics?
So AI has a much broader scope, so by training machine and using that, you are going to discover new materials that you can use to activate, and you are going to expand bioinformatics. So how you can take biological data and everything that is there and assemble and look at new biomarkers, discover new biomarkers which may be signature of a disease at a very early stage. Because many of the disease, say for example cancer, you take pancreatic cancer, once it goes around above first and second stage, survival is almost nil. But if you, at a very early stage, you detect this disease, then there are ways in which you can treat it more effectively. And if you can catch it even pre-cancerous stage, there are a lot of preventive measures you can take. So that discovery of multiple biomarker signature of disease, because a disease doesn't just show one symptom, one signature. There are many things that change. So once you discover, that's where again AI can do. So, and then you can predict what therapy will be more suitable and effective. So predictive, feature can also come from AI machine learning. Okay, so AI can benefit in many ways. Healthcare area is one area where it is bound to make major impact.
And on a lighter note, we would also love to know your secret behind having a huge number of citations and number of patents.
So,
We would love to know your secret behind having huge number of citations and huge number
again,
of.
again, going back to this, if you are doing work that has some significance, meaningful, people will read. If you just make some research, do some studies and publish, it's not going to get noticed much, because now you see there is you can see tremendous expansion of journals, publications, So how are you going to read all these journals?
So you always had the motive that your research had to have some kind of practical implication.
No, I'm saying that it has to be impactful. Impactful means either it is some kind of major discovery, or it has some really, as you say, meaningful impact, in developing some technology that benefits. In the case of healthcare, it can be sensor, it can be imaging, it can be therapeutic action that's showing efficacy in early stage. Then people will notice and read and cite. That's what generate citation. And then we have also been very active in trying to get, entrepreneurship, spin-off companies, formed on the basis of what we are doing. So we work with them. We work with them and try to say, this is another thing that university professors, they have different mindset. And the mindset is, oh, I have made this big discovery, and it is definitely going to be useful to the society. But they really say, okay, that's it, that's their thinking. It may not always be true, because society may not need that technology, So rather than saying, what is really meaningful area that I can work on, the mindset is, I will discover this and I'm sure it will be useful for something. That has changed. Anyway.
Right, sir. Amazing. And what problem do you think is happening in taking science outreach to specifically rural areas? And how do you think ISER projects are actually changing that scenario?
Well, I hope the ISER projects, as we are discussing now, collectively, this is a really historic moment it was yesterday when we signed, the day before yesterday,
We got to
when
know
we
it
signed
yesterday.
MOU, pledging to work together. I think that was a historic moment. And then we started defining the project. That's another thing I want to say, that the directors can all sign MOUs. They pledge it and they can support. But they are not the one who is going to advance science. Who will advance science? You, researchers, students who are involved in, doing research or education, thinking, you are the one who will do actual work. So this is where we are now trying to work at that level. I said top connection and bottom connection. So here we are trying to define these projects that will involve at least 2 ICERs in each project, so that we cultivate this culture of working together and trying to put 2 minds together at least to see what will make a difference. Bihar, unfortunately, is plagued with other kinds of research. So I would rather not go into that. I'm not a political person. I don't want to make any political statement. But I think things have to change. And who can change? You, young generation.
Do you foresee a lot of student exchange programs? It's also after this MOU, sir.
We are committed to working together with Indian science community. Our theme has always been that we like to practice, advocate, and promote science without border. Because the health, energy, environment, all these are global issues. Maybe more concentrated problems in certain geographic location, but issues are global. We have one Earth, one planet we live on, right? So there we need to work together. So going back to your question, yes, we are committed to providing exchange opportunities. So those of you students, one mode could be that if you are finishing a bachelor or master, you can come and do PhD at our place, and we will be gladly consider in that opportunity, provide support. The second one is that if you are in a joint project, then we can also provide some support for on selected basis for coming over there for a shorter period, 3 to 6 months, to work on a joint project. So that exchange we also will be able to provide.
Right. And we are nearing to the end of the podcast, sir. Lastly, if you could encapsulate your scientific journey in a single sentence, what would that be?
My professional journey has been of a dreamer. I always dream, and I always think outside of the box. This is a very important thing. Don't narrow your thinking to what you are trained in. Reach out. Other discipline. Talk to your colleagues. That's what I do. I always do. I always consider myself as a student and learner. That's why I was in that meeting the oldest person, but a very young mind, very inquisitive, and very eager to learn. And that's what I would like you all to think and focus on, that there are very few things that are impossible and out of your reach.
Thank you, sir. Your words inspired us a lot.
Okay?
And thank you so much for agreeing to do this podcast, sir. It was a pleasure having you. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I hope it is useful, and I hope it inspires you, because you are the one who can make a difference.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Your favorite breakthrough moment in your career?
I would think that my favorite breakthrough moment was going to University of Pennsylvania, which I did not realize was a very high-level Ivy League school.
If not a scientist, what would you be?
I was born in a businessman's family. I probably will be working in the business with my parents, so that would have been the case.
One technology from science fiction you wish was real.
One technology for science fiction.
From science fiction which you wish was real.
Well, actually, we did transform one fiction. That was, the fiction in 1966 called The Fantastic Voyage. And this was about a diplomat who had disease, blood clot, and the scientists shrunk a submarine to nanoscale, injected in his bloodstream, and with the medical doctors and the tools to remove that blood clot. So inspired by that, again believing that nothing is impossible, or almost nothing is impossible, we developed in 2002 the concept of nano-clinic. Nano-clinic was a little silica bubble with targeting, and then we packaged that with the diagnostic therapeutic agent and injected in animal to show actually that it could go to the target cancer site and treat it. And that technology was licensed by a French company called Nanobiotics. That Nanobiotics company now is publicly trading 600 million euro company in Paris.
A scientific myth you wish people would stop believing.
Scientific people will...
Myth. A scientific myth you wish people would stop believing.
Myth. Well, scientific myth, there are lots of myths which don't have scientific basis. On the other hand, there are also myths that Ayurvedic medicine, for example, is witchcraft, which is not true. People are now finding out. We have done research in like turmeric. An important ingredient is curcumin. The curcumin has a very important anti-cancer. So there are that myth that this is witchcraft, the Ayurvedic medicine, whether you're talking about ashwagandha, you're talking about ginseng, you're talking about turmeric, they all have important, really that our forefathers, they believed in, and now there is scientific basis research. But we need to have a scientific basis.
And so the last question is, we know you have a busy schedule, but if you had an extra 1 hour in a day, how would you spend it?
1 hour a day?
If you had an extra hour in a day, how would you spend it?
Well, which I don't. But if I do, maybe I will learn meditation. I have not done, coming from India, having that heritage. Meditation to clear the cluttered mind and have fresh thinking.
Thank you, sir.